Donkey Kong Country was a beloved platformer series in the 90s on the Super Nintendo. They were the perfect combination of charm, difficulty, and they were just flat out fun. Not to mention they were arguably the best looking games on the Super Nintendo. This series was so good that they made 3 games in 3 straight years. But after that, Donkey Kong Country went on a pretty long hiatus. Instead, Nintendo made Donkey Kong games such as Donkey Kong 64, Donkey Konga, DK King of Swing, and other games like that that kind of feel like spin-offs. They weren't necessarily bad, but they couldn't hold a candle to Donkey Kong Country. But after 14 long years of no games in the series and inferior games on the N64 and the GameCube, we finally got the return of Donkey Kong Country. Donkey Kong Country Returns was released for the Nintendo Wii in 2010 and was obviously a much anticipated return to the beloved series from the 90s. After 14 years of no games, Nintendo finally decided to give fans a brand new game in the series. And after playing through it for the first time, I can confidently say it was a great return. It starts out with the story, of course, and for a platformer the cutscenes are actually quite nice. And the story is that the Tiki Tak tribe show up and hypnotize some of the animals on the island and make them steal Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong's bananas. Quick disclaimer, there will probably be several times during this video I say Diddy. Just know that I'm only referring to Diddy Kong, not any other Diddies that you might be familiar with. Obviously, they love their bananas, so they set out to retrieve them, and that's the beginning story. Not a lot to it, but we're not here for the story, we're here for the gameplay, and this game's gameplay is pretty good. With any platformer, the levels are of course very important, but just as important, if not more, is the controls, and I think this game controls pretty well with a decent selection of moves to pull off. You have your standard jump, of course. You can also do a roll, grab and throw stuff, hit the ground with your hands, squat down, and even blow air while you're squatting, which you'll use more than you might think. Of course, this game being on the Wii means that there are mandatory motion controls, which seems to be people's biggest gripe with this game, and I probably have to agree. Overall, the controls feel perfectly fine. I feel like I have good control of Donkey Kong, but having to shake the Wii remote every time I want to roll or hit the ground is kind of frustrating. Not a deal breaker or anything, but the fact that they've remade this game twice now is telling, because I'm sure both of them are less annoying to play. And by the way, if you do decide to play the Wii version, please play with a nunchuck. I tried to play with the Wii remote turned sideways, and I could only handle a couple levels. The D-pad is brutal for this game. I didn't try to use it for some of the harder levels, but that sounds like an absolute nightmare. Now we all know a Donkey Kong Country game would not be complete without his faithful sidekick, Diddy Kong, who is extremely useful. For starters, he essentially gives you 2 more hit points, which is really nice for a game of this difficulty, and I'll talk more about that later. But he also has a jetpack that allows you to float in the air for a second, which doesn't sound like much, but trust me, it makes things way easier. There seems to be a lot of jumps in this game where Diddy is not required, but jumping with just Donkey Kong is a lot more stressful. Sadly, Diddy is not always with you. He is available in almost every level, and if you beat a level with him, then he carries over to the next one, but if you die, you don't respawn with him. He is only available through the DK barrels you can find either at the beginning of a lot of levels or at some checkpoints. However, some levels either don't have DK barrels or they're very scarce. So there is going to be times where you'll have to just make do with Donkey Kong. And Diddy isn't technically required to beat any levels that I'm aware of, he just makes it a lot easier. Another thing that makes this game a lot easier is the items. Every world has a shop where you can visit Cranky Kong and purchase a few things that will help you out. You can buy extra lives, an extra heart that lasts for a level, a key that can open certain areas in each world, a parrot that helps you locate puzzle pieces, and even banana juice that gives you like 10 extra hearts for one level, which is really useful for boss levels. I used everything but the key and parrot through my run because I wasn't really interested in 100%ing this game, and I'm never that interested in doing that with any game. 2 of the main things you'll have to do if you want to get 100% is collect all the puzzle pieces and get all the letters in each level. I did this in a few levels where it was easier, but I had enough trouble just finishing this game in the first place, so getting 100% wasn't exactly in my best interest. And this brings up a big topic of this video, the difficulty. I certainly don't consider myself to be good at platformers, and I was not good at this game at all. But is that more me being bad or this game being difficult? I think it's a combination of the two. I can't really put my finger on why this game is so hard, it just was. Not every level, of course, but there was at least one level per world that would absolutely have me stumped. But thankfully, Donkey Kong Country Returns actually has an out for sucky players like myself called the Super Guide. I don't know the exact number, but I know after you keep dying and dying on the same level, there will be an option to activate the Super Guide, which essentially just does the whole level for you. I hate to admit that I had to use this multiple times, but there was some levels I just couldn't seem to get past. But I am glad that they had this implemented because I will once again say this game is hard. Some courses just had so much going on, so many enemies and obstacles to avoid, and sometimes it was just overwhelming. But I'm also glad that you have to die a few times before the Super Guide becomes available. It would be too easy if you died once or twice and they offered to complete the level for you. So I'm definitely happy with the balance they struck there. I also like the balance they struck with the variety of level types in this game. Yes, a lot of the levels are standard platforming, but there are other kinds like the minecart ones, the barrel rocket ones, and of course the boss levels. The minecart and barrel rocket ones are very similar though, as you don't get to go at your own pace and it's mostly dependent on how good your timing is. They can be fun and have their moments, but to be honest, I wasn't the biggest fan of them. I don't care for those kinds of levels in the Mario games because sometimes I like to be able to slow down and think about what I'm going to do next, and when it's forcing me to keep moving, that stresses me out. Plus, some of these feel like they're obnoxiously hard or annoying. Some of them are okay though, and those are enjoyable. Thankfully, these are just every now and then because I prefer the regular levels personally. And there's other kinds of levels, of course. There's at least one or two of those levels that something is chasing you, which now that I think about it is kind of the same thing as the vehicle ones, so yeah, screw those levels too. I'm just kidding, they're okay. But there's also the boss stages, which there is one of at the end of each world, and I'll just go ahead and say this, I am not a huge fan of 2D platformer bosses. A lot of the ones in the 2D Mario games are kind of boring, but the bosses in this game are actually interesting. At the end of every world, the Tikis will hypnotize one of the animals from the specific world to attack you, and their attacks will be specific to them and what the world is about. For example, the cave world has a mole boss that you have to fight on minecarts, and the factory one has a chicken in a big robot suit. Now sure, most of them you're still jumping on top of them to damage them, but the bosses themselves feel unique, and I never knew what to expect when facing them. And yes, more often than not they are hard, and even a couple of them I ended up using the banana juice to help me out, but overall I think they had a pretty good difficulty level. I also think the worlds themselves are pretty cool. You have typical places like a jungle and a forest, but there's also a factory, cliffs, and even a volcano to end it, which was definitely a neat world. They help keep the levels fresh with all new enemies and obstacles to watch out for with each new world, not to mention all kinds of secret areas to collect puzzle pieces and other cool collectibles. But yeah, lots of different enemies to deal with, and even though some of them were just annoying, it kept things interesting, and I'm thankful for that. Donkey Kong Country Returns was, well, a return to a beloved series. It was a fun game, and sure it had its problems, but I don't think people cared that much when they waited so long for this series to come back. The worlds were interesting, the levels were challenging, the bosses were unique, and I think trying to 100% this game would be a fun challenge and something extra to do, because it's not a particularly long game either. To be honest, it should have been on the GameCube because the motion controls absolutely make this game worse, and it would have looked just as good on the GameCube. But even with its few flaws, it's still an awesome game overall, and I had a fun time playing it when I wasn't pulling my hair out, which again might be just because I'm bad, but yeah, Donkey Kong Country Returns gets a thumbs up from me. Great game, and a great return to the series. Thank you so much for watching this Donkey Kong Country Returns retrospective. Let me know what you think of this game, and have you played either of the remakes? Also let me know if you would like to see a video on Tropical Freeze. Apparently that one is even better, and it looks like a lot of fun. Also let me know any other games that you would like to see a retrospective on. I specialize in Nintendo games, but suggest any game you want. I definitely want to branch out as well. But as always, thanks so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe for more videos, and have a great day.